Hello and welcome to the 60th lecture on financial instrument. As far as India's climate action is concerned, let us understand where we stand as far as the financial instruments are concerned. So, to do this, we have to discuss on, or to understand this, we have to discuss on the following. First is, let us talk about climate strategy in terms as far as India is concerned, between mitigation and adaptation. And let us discuss the climate finance landscape, international climate finance realities, domestic capital mobilization, financial instruments, and case studies such as Barodara Green Municipal Bond is concerned. India's climate strategy, particularly mitigation goals and adaptation needs. Mitigation, the low carbon transition, adaptation in terms of securing vulnerable systems. So, first, as far as mitigation is concerned, we have ambitious targets, that commitment to net zero by 2070, achieving 50% non-fossil fuel power capacity by 2030 or end of this decade. National Green Hydrogen Mission 2023 that positions India as a global hub for green hydrogen production and export. Critical enablers, low cost international finance in terms of GCF, Global Climate Fund, and global tech transfer, and de-risking the private investments. So, sectoral focus, e-mobility, industrial energy efficiency, battery storage, and building cooling demands. As far as the adaptation is concerned, there are securing in terms of vulnerable systems, high climate vulnerability, severe exposure to extreme weather events such as cyclones, floods, droughts. Those threaten the socio-economic progress. Priority sector, agriculture and water security, top priorities alongside health, biodiversity, and climate resilient infrastructure. The financial burden, an estimated 72 trillion required by 2030 to build adaptation capital stock and manage climate induced damages. Technological gaps are urgent need for international technology cooperation or co-creation and overcoming the intellectual property barriers such as IP barriers. So, now let us understand what are the systematic challenges as far as the finance tracking is concerned, as far as India as a nation is concerned. So, the definitional ambiguity, lack of a universally accepted definition of climate finance and inconsistent reporting standard. Additionality problem, funds are often repurposed developmental aid rather than new and additional climate specific capital. So, these are the additional problem along with that. Reporting discrepancies, widespread issues of double counting and misrepresentation of non-concessional loans as grant equivalent finance. Measurement bias, adaptation finance remains significantly harder to measure and track compared to mitigation efforts. So, the key sources as far as climate finance received by India are concerned, the GCF Green Climate Fund. So, let us see from various sources how much money has been received by India as far as the climate finance is concerned. From GCF Green Climate Fund, so $542.3 million across 9 projects has been received by India. But the reality is heavy reliance on domestic co-financing. For example, the coastal resilience project requires 67% of its USD, that means 130.27 million cost, to be borne by Indian state and central government. So, if you see 60% is there, but rest 130.27 million dollar, it has to be borne by India, its state and central government. So, it is a heavy reliance on on our domestic co-financing. The second is the GEF, Global Environment Facility, punching above weight in terms of funding. So USD 500.49 million GEF Trust Fund for 51 national projects. But the reality is India's co-financing ratio is an exceptionally high, 11.55 to 1, far exceeding the GEF 7:1 global target. That means massive domestic private capital mobilization for every GEF dollar is coming in. So it is a very high level of national reliability or co-financing as far as the GEF fund also concerned. The third is Climate Investment Funds or CIF. So 794 million US dollar approved funding. Focus is for solar energy, 3+ gigawatt capacity, transmission infrastructure. Co-financing USD 9.54 billion. So 65% came from private sector, and this came from other development or multilateral development banks, 20%, and 15% from government. So a lot of matching grant is coming from internal or domestic sectors. The fourth is MDB, multilateral development banks. So 3.737 billion climate finance reached by 2022. So total during 2016 to 2020 is about 16.97 billion. So of the target, only this much has received by during 2016 to 2020. So finance composition, out of that 63% for mitigation, 32% for adaptation. So 94% of non-concessional loans, that means not the soft finance, they lack favorable developmental terms or interest rates, essentially functioning as standard market debt. So this itself is a kind of market debt. India receives significant climate finance but heavily dependent on loans or non-grants. Strong reliance on co-financing and public capital. It raises concern on true financial support vis-a-vis debt burden. So this is where the climate finance received by India from various key sources and the actual scenario as far as the co-financing in terms of the debt, loan, or a matching grant burden is concerned. Now, as far as the domestic mobilization is concerned, the strategic role of sovereign green bonds. Financing gap. Domestic burden. India's ambitious climate action is overwhelmingly financed by domestic resources due to significant shortfalls in international climate finance. Alignment with climate commitments. 50% power capacity from non-fossil fuels by 2030. 45% reduction in emissions intensity from 2005 levels. Domestic financing aligned with NDC targets. Sovereign green bonds, the key initiatives announced in Union Budget 2022-23. The aim is to raise additional global and domestic capital to support the green investment. So the target sector, mitigation, renewable energy as far as solar, wind, hydro is concerned, and clean transport and energy efficiency sector. As far as adaptation is concerned, the climate resilient infrastructure and early warning and observation systems. In these two sectors, this money could be utilized. Execution and market response. Successful issuance early 2023, 16,000 crores successfully raised across two equal tranches, January and February 2023. Maturity and investment issued as 5-year and 10-year bonds predominantly absorbed by local banks and insurance companies. As far as understanding bonds as a financial, understanding bond as a financial instrument. So let us understand the bonds as a financial instrument. So a basic diagram on the right hand top is given how a bond works. So bond principal, interest payment, and also the bond principal back. So look at this. It's a debt instrument used to raise capital, issued by governments, banks, and also various corporates or corporations. Investors lend money and issuer repay with interest over certain time period. It is widely used in blended finance for developmental projects. So first is the type of thematic bonds. One is use of proceeds or UOP bonds. These funds are earmarked for specific impact driven projects. Focus is in terms of environmental and social outcomes, widely used in climate and sustainable development finance. So as far as the green bond family is concerned, you see the green bonds, the climate resilience bonds, and the blue bonds. So in terms of the green bonds, the finance, or you say the renewable energy, clean transport, wastewater management, climate adaptation, and in terms of goal to be achieved, including both mitigation and adaptation. The climate resilience bonds, it is a kind of subtype of green bond. The focus is adaptation and resilience building, and it combines the debt instrument, performance-based returns, and also some insurance features. As far as the blue bond is concerned, the focus is marine and ocean-based projects. It supports biodiversity conservation, sustainable fisheries, and coastal economies. So let us move on to the SLBs, the sustainability linked bonds. So these are linked to predefined sustainability performance targets, or you call the SPTs. The focus is improving the ESG performance over time. The key features are not project are two. They are not project specific. They are performance based structures. As far as the penalty is concerned, higher interest or coupon rates if targets are not met. They are predetermined SPTs or sustainability linked bonds before the maturity level. So as far as the transition bond is concerned, they are used to finance the decarbonization of high emission industries. These are applicable as far as use of proceeds or UOP bonds are concerned. Sustainably linked bonds or SLBs are concerned, but the focused area or the sectors which are focused under this transition bonds are steel sector, cement industry sector, and also energy intensive industries. The flexible structure can be structured either as use of proceeds UOP bonds or sustainability linked bonds, we say the SLBs. They align the sustainability linked bonds, they align financial incentives with sustainability performance, support a real economy transition, not just green projects. So you can see on the right hand side we have various color depictions. One is with respect to environmental in terms of green gradation, social with respect to gray gradation, and governance with respect to the color gradation of blue. So based on that we can see the from company to public disclosure, and you have different ESGs measures collected and calculated as far as the various scores are concerned. So let's take the case study of Barodra. So we usually call it Barodra, but spelled or named it BADODRA. The Barodra Green Municipal Bond. So the instrument concerned here is India's and Asia's first certified green municipal bond for sustainable water infrastructure. So look at this. The financial instrument here is a green municipal bond for sustainable water infrastructure. This was issued in 2024. The type is municipal green bond. It's a debt instrument. City is Barodara, India. Issuer is Barodara Municipal Corporation, and sector, for which sector it is applicable, it is for water and infrastructure sector. And investors, primarily private investors. The purpose, finance, water supply systems, and wastewater treatment infrastructure. As far as the sector it addresses the urban water demand and untreated sewage discharge. The projects that are funded in terms of 2 sewage treatment plants, STPs, auxiliary infrastructure pumping stations, and the total project cost as far as 360.26 crore is concerned. Issuances 2022, 100 crore in terms of private placement, 2,400 crore in terms of green municipal bond. The tenure is 5 years and coupon rate is 7.9%. The credit rating achieved an AA, that means AA plus, AA plus rating. So it's a very good rating indicating strong credit worthiness. As far as the economic model is concerned, we also have the circular economy concept that capitalizes on Gujarat's 2018 policy mandating the industrial use of treated water, generating a new revenue stream for the city by selling recycled water to local industries. So we have various circular economies schemes that so one of this is in terms of the Gujarat's 2018 policy, which mandates the industrial use of treated water, generating a new revenue stream for the city by selling recycled water to local industries. So this is what we call in terms of the circular economy. So for this material, we have taken the help of the report published by MOEFCC, India's third National Communication and Initial Adaptation Communication, and another Green Bond Framework by Ministry of Finance, Government of India, and the CEW report what talks about how can India boost financing for urban climate resilience. Moving on to conclusion of this part. So this part today we discussed about the finance instrument, how much debt or how much money India has received in terms of the climate finance sector is concerned from various sources. So India has ambitious climate targets but faces a massive financing gaps. Climate finance received is insufficient, loan heavy, not granted, dependent on co-financing and private capital. Way forward, scale up, strengthen and promote. So scale up domestic finance mechanisms in terms of green bonds and municipal bonds, strengthen in terms of technology transfer and global cooperation, promote in terms of innovation models like Barodara for urban resilience. So with this, friends, we completed all the 60 lectures as far as this course is concerned. The course is climate risk, adaptation and sustainable development. Friends, with respect to this, let me summarize the whole course, the 60 lectures which we covered over 12 weeks period. It is a very well capsule course. Why I say it a well capsule course? Because we started with the science of climate, the science of climate change. We explained you how or what are the various drivers that leads to or that give us the change what in terms of the climate what we are receiving these days. In turn, we discussed about the temperature variation, the temperature fluctuation. We went back to the history of past 500 million years. We tried to discuss about the average temperature of Earth, how it has fluctuated over past 500 million years back or since past 500 million years, evidently between 10 to 30 degrees centigrade. We also attributed this to the greenhouse gas impact or effect and related this, tried to attach this to anthropogenic induced greenhouse gas emission. And various greenhouse gases, dominantly as we know, carbon dioxide is and this carbon dioxide we try to use as the coin to compare and contrast with respect to other greenhouse gases as far as the global warming potential is concerned. Then we try to see that how the temperature of recent century are varying, and in that context the industrial and pre-industrial era. So between 1850 to 1900, the average temperature for the period between 1850 to 1900 have been taken as the benchmark to compare and contrast, and from there onwards we are trying to see that how much is the temperature rise, because we are trying to definitely understand the temperature rise in this pre-industrial era because of the human activities and anthropogenic activities. And then we are trying to arrest this temperature rise by 1.5 degree, by 2 degree, and all different numbers are coming up, and the target is 2050, 2070. So these kind of things we try to understand. So that gave us a basic understanding that yes, we are in an era of climate change where the single dominant or the important variable, that is temperature, is rising, and we are convinced in terms of a differential graph. I have explained you that with and without scenario, with anthropogenic intervention, without anthropogenic intervention. So it was very prominent, very convincing to understand that with anthropogenic emission, the temperature rise is very high. So that means human being or the activities done by us are need to be blamed. So to bring it back, that means we have to reverse the process. We have to slow down the pace of temperature rise. Then we also try to understand the various drivers, the 6 drivers that impact this. And we went on to understand the various risks the human beings are suffering, the ecosystem is suffering because of this temperature rise or the climate change. How the people, the ecosystem, the various systems are getting affected across the world. So we have taken instances, examples. Then we try to understand that there is no other way. We have to adapt and mitigate to cope with this changing climate. So various technological measures, various nature-based solutions are available, or we need to practice to match or to cope up the situation as far as the climate change is concerned. So how to match, how to bring out this adaptation and mitigation measures. So lot of this we have discussed in terms of the solutions. For that, we also discussed that there are a lot of technological solutions. There is a lot of nature-based solutions. We gave examples in various sectors in terms of irrigation sector, in terms of agriculture and irrigation sector, in terms of transport sector, in terms of industry sector, in terms of urban sector. We discussed about gray, green, blue infrastructure and whatnot. So we try to understand that we have to adapt and mitigate to cope with the changing climate. Now, the next component is we also try to understand that how this can be predicted, various different scenarios, model-based scenarios in terms of SRES, in terms of RCPs, in terms of SSPs. We discuss various scenarios to model the climate, the changing climate pattern. So why to model? Once we model, we predict. We predict the pattern. We understand it in various scenarios that what will happen, and so that we will be pre-informed, and then we can take a lot of management decision in advance before receiving the ill effect of climate change. And the third part we very well discuss the other aspects. What are the other aspects? the technology. What are the technology available? We discuss in terms of nature-based technologies, in terms of other technologies, including the CCS, carbon capture and storage technologies. In another week, we discussed about the nature-based technology applicable to various sectors. We also discussed the financial aspects. What do we understand by green finance? What are the various financial measures we have as far as the to achieve various sustainable development goal targets? So we tried to give a broad picture and understanding that how finance plays a very important role. What is the commitment in terms of $100 million funding from the developed nations or the biggest polluters or emitters? So all these things we discussed, that finance or funding mechanism is a must to match with the situation as far as adaptation and mitigation is concerned. And we also tried to discuss the Indian scenario in specific, and also we browsed through all various negotiations in terms of policy and diplomacy, what has happened, starting from the PPP, the Stockholm conference, to up to the last COP30. So we have gone through various policies, various negotiation fora, starting with Kyoto Protocol and the the 2009 we discussed in Glasgow, where the net zero agreement, the Paris, where we signed a kind of NDC, national determined contribution, and also moving on, we went beyond, in 2022 we signed this net zero in Glasgow. So we are moving on. We discussed the diplomacy, the policy diplomacy aspect of this. And then in the last week, we discussed about India specific with India specific examples in terms of its situation, in terms of its policy, in terms of its technological readiness, in terms of its the financial situation. But we are very well convinced that India is doing exceptionally well in contributing to the climate change sector. India is a very conscious and cautious nation. It has come out with the Panchamrit to achieve net zero by 2070. Lot of the achievements, lots of the targets, which are sumoto targets given by India through its INDC, that means intended nationally determined contribution. These targets are achieved or have been achieved well before the target date. So that is a good symbol. And also India is putting a lot of money in the finance in terms of a partnership, along with the grants, whatever is coming from various climate instruments or climate sectors. So that means India is heavily investing in the renewable resources sector and in various adaptation mitigation sector as far as the climate change is concerned. So the message is very clear. This particular generation need to understand the scenario as far as the sustainable development is concerned. The climate and climate change, the basics in terms of the science, the need, the history as far as what are the risk as we understood, the risk we have started realizing in terms of extreme weather events. More and more number of extreme weather events have been happening, and we all are party to that. We have been receiving from any corner of the world. We are one or the other extreme weather events are happening. So we know that. So it is good for this generation to take this course, understand the basics of climate change, the risk, the adaptation and mitigation options we have through various means of technology, nature-based solutions, or various adaptation means, and the diplomacy, the policy, and the finance environment around the climate change. It is a much it's a vibrant field. Every other day developments are happening. Just as you mentioned in the last class, the 2035, the version 3 or the third version of our NDC, or India's intended nationally determined contribution has only been released in the last week of March 2026. So that means it is a happening domain, and India as a nation is doing, and we as an individual have the right and duty to contribute towards it. The first direction towards it is to be knowledgeable, to know what is climate change, what are the various risks because of climate change, what are the adaptation and mitigation options we have, how we can do it through technological means, through nature-based solution means, and what are the other infrastructure we have in terms of policy, in terms of a negotiation table, and in terms of financial support around and across this domain. Thank you very much for opting for this course. Wish you a good luck. Thank you and bye-bye.